Bonds is the home run king. This is his hometown, and we were, delighted to have the opportunity to report on that true information.
Giants fans didn't seem quite as delighted, and they still aren't.
In fairness to Barry, I feel like when he went before the grand jury, he should have had the assumption of confidentiality.
I think this whole thing from the start has pretty much been a witch hunt for, kind of the star players, the highest profile players.
Were we unpopular with some Giants fans as a result of this story? Absolutely. Some of the responses we got were quite aggressive.
Oh, I mean, it ranges from, crawl back into the hole you've crawled out of to you bleep and bleep and bleep and bleep.
Believe me, and I'm a firm believer, if you want to maintain your illusions about things, people should maintain their illusions about things. Keep believing there's a Wizard of Oz. But, I also believe, because I'm in this profession, I believe in the profession, that people ought to know sometimes if it's just a guy behind the curtain. And then they can keep believing in the wizard if they want.
It was the revolutionary experiment that showed what could lead ordinary people to perform unthinkable acts. Now, for the first time in decades, who will follow orders?
Imagine this scenario. You go to a prestigious university to participate in a learning and memory experiment. When you arrive, you discover that the teaching instrument is this machine, which seems to give electroshocks to a man on the other side of the wall. As you move up the scale, he begins to scream out in pain.
The experiment requires that you continue.
The experimenter pressures you to go on. Would you agree to continue with the experiment?
That's all.
That's the question Stanley Milgram, a social psychologist at Yale University, posed in a famous series of experiments about obedience and authority.
Answer, horse.
He told his subjects they were part of a learning and memory experiment. But Milgram wasn't testing memory. He wanted to know how much pain an ordinary person would inflict on a stranger when ordered by an authority figure.
Sentence, movie.
His subjects, the so-called teachers, gave what they thought was an increasingly painful shock each time a wrong answer was given.
Under 65 volts. Time.
But in fact, there were no shocks at all.
180 volts.
And the subject was hearing a pre-recorded voice at each shock level.
Can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man. 435 volts.
In the end, 2/3 of his subjects administered the highest, most dangerous shock on the machine.
Answer is woman. 450 volts. That's it.
It's been 45 years since the Milgram experiment took place, but would people behave any differently today?
Incorrect. 150 volts.
That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble.
Will Troy listen as the learner begs him to stop, or will he follow Brian's orders?
Tell him the correct word, pair of white.
The correct word was white horse.
And the next item, please continue.
The next item is sad.
He obeys the orders.
Face.
Why didn't you stop?
I was just doing my job. I was doing what I was supposed to do.
Go on with the procedure, please, teacher.
There's no way to know for sure whether any of our subjects would have continued farther up the scale. However, Milgram's research may offer a clue.
Don't the man's health mean anything?
Whether the learner likes it or not,
But he might be dead in there.
You heard the man say, "My heart hurts."
I did.
And just having the guy in the lab coat saying, "Keep going, it's fine. I'm telling you it's fine, going," somewhat divorced you from your own decision-making power?
Oh, sure. It's just like when I'm told to administer the state tests for hours on end.
You're doing your job.
Doing my job.
The majority of people who continued to follow orders refused to take responsibility for the learner's safety.
It's not my responsibility. You all, brought this. We're volunteers.
It's your control lab experiment. So
I see. Okay.
I'm just a conduit for you.
Well, I just flipped the switch. I mean, he chose to be there himself to take the shocks, and that was his choice.
If somebody walks up to you and says the blackboard is white and they've got on a lab coat, do you believe them? No, you've got your own eyes. I mean, you look at Nuremburg. I was just following orders. I'm sorry, we're still gonna line you up and shoot you for war crimes. That's not an excuse.
Fred is talking about the Nuremberg trials of Nazi war criminals who defended themselves, saying they were just following orders.
I had to obey. I had only learned the life of a soldier.
During the war, Adolf Eichmann deported millions of Jews to death camps. He was finally arrested in 1961. 3 months later, Milgram began his famous experiment, fascinated by how such an ordinary-looking man could commit such heinous acts. Is there an analogy here to what we saw with Nazi Germany?
What we find when we have situations where people act in atrocious ways, okay, that there's an escalation. They start small, they move up to more and more difficult and more challenging and more questionable behavior.
We discovered that even with a moral guide sitting in the same room as our subject, there was little decrease in compliance with the orders of an authority figure. 63% of our subjects continued to electroshock the learner even after our accomplice protested. That's only a slight drop from the 70% in our original experiment. Milgram believed that if you could find some other people who also wanted to reject the authority, that was your best bet for breaking out of the conformity.
Stand in an elevator facing the wrong way.
And you'll see how this man tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he's one of the group now. Here's a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First, he makes a full turn to the rear, and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door. Everybody's changed positions.
Sometimes all that's necessary for evil to succeed is for ordinary people to just do what they're told. Even without the orders of Milgram's authority figure, the subjects in the Stanford prison experiment lost their moral compass. They began to act in morally questionable ways because of the power of the situation.
I was able to set an agenda that was really evil, and yet nobody questioned it and nobody stopped it.
The guards invented a degrading series of psychological humiliations.
You be the bride of Frankenstein, and you be Frankenstein. I want you to walk over here like Frankenstein and say that you love to master you.
Anything I could find that, would humiliate them in some way.
Get up close. Get up
that
close.
would try to break down any solidarity they had with each other.
You're smart to it, you get down here and do 10 push-ups.
You and your CBS and all the big amusement industries represent a way of silencing everybody. Communication was supposed to be two-way, but it's turned out to be basically one-way. From those people who can afford to own a transmitter, which costs a few $1 million, to the little guy who can afford to own a receiver that costs a few bucks. So there are millions of receivers and people at the other end and only a few transmitters, and I think that is one of the major, if not the major human problem now, because everybody is off the air.